Well, we had so much to cover on Friday night. There's still a couple, including this one, which is the appointment of 2 new members to the Intelligence Committee, if you haven't heard about it.
House Speaker Mike Johnson has now tapped 2 allies of former President Trump to serve on the all-important House Intelligence Committee.
After the early resignation of 2 Republican reps, Utah's Chris Stewart and Wisconsin's Mike Gallagher, Mike Johnson, MAGA Mike, was left with those 2 seats to fill, and bowing to pressure from the Freedom Caucus, who are pushing for their former chair, Scott Perry.
In an effort to please Donald Trump and to hang on to his speakership, Speaker Mike Johnson has appointed Scott Perry and Ronnie Jackson to the House Select Committee on Intelligence. Perry, you may remember, had his phone seized by the FBI as part of an investigation into his role as one of the chief architects in Congress.
And Ronnie Jackson, who was the head of the White House medical unit under Obama too, but under Trump, things got a little crazier.
Then there's Ronnie. Ronnie Jackson's his name. He was demoted as a rear admiral in the United States Navy. He was someone who the Oath Keepers were seeking to protect during the insurrection on January 6th, because the Oath Keepers believed he, Ronnie Jackson, had, in the words of an Oath Keeper, quote, critical data to protect, end quote.
Members of both parties are pissed at Mike for this bowing to this pressure, calling it rewarding bad behavior and caving to threats, and that, it can work both ways. Well, Mike didn't even bother to inform the committee chair, Mike Turner of Ohio, Republican, or the ranking member, Democrat Jim Hines, about this.
It's a controversial move, and Punchbowl News reports that Speaker Johnson didn't even tell the committee chair he was appointing them.
There was probably a good reason why Speaker Johnson did not notify the leadership of the House Intelligence Committee, even fellow Republicans, that he was naming 2 new members. That's because these new members are grossly unqualified for those roles. Both are massive security risks to the nation. But that doesn't matter to today's GOP as long as they are loyal to Donald Trump.
Turner and Hines had been working hard to restore the nonpartisanship of the committee, and this is going to be obviously a concerning development, says Hines. While a few folks are still playing this little game of, well, give them a chance. Maybe they've learned their lesson, a la Susan Collins. Well, we'll see, but let's take a look at these 2 fine men. Let's have a look at Scott Perry, who is the real concern. So he's repeatedly been mentioned during the January 6th committee's investigation into the insurrection at the Capitol for number 1 thing. He had his phone seized. He'd been trying to get through to Mark Meadows to push the conspiracy to not certify. And he has also allegedly sought a pardon from the White House, though he denies it. And he declined to testify before the January 6th committee. He was charged by Pennsylvania for altering reports at a sewage plant in 2002, along with others of his Hydrotech employees, related to levels of chlorine and acidity of water discharged into a creek. He got his record expunged from that. Then he said people need guns to protect themselves from the government. In 2011, he told the Allentown Morning Call that citizens need guns to protect ourselves from an overbearing government that does not do the will of the people. Though he was a military officer whose soldiers might be the targets of those protecting themselves from the government. He voted no on the Violence Against Women's Act. He alleged that it was too broad in scope by offering protections to gays, lesbians, immigrants, and Native American women. He voted for the Respect for Marriage Act in 2022. He blamed God and trees for polluting the Chesapeake. In a 2017 town hall meeting in Red Lion, Perry cited God as a possible violator of environmental regulations. Asked about proposed budget cuts to the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, Perry talked about appropriate levels of protection, and cited the Chesapeake Bay cleanup plans that he said were unfair, focusing on some sources of pollution while leaving others alone. And if you are spiritual and you believe in God, one of the violators was God, because the forests were providing a certain amount of nitrates and phosphates to the Chesapeake Bay. Okay. And environmental experts say that these riparian buffers, i.e. trees, near the waterways actually protect them from pollution runoff. He blamed ISIS for the Las Vegas attack, the mass shooting in Las Vegas. Perry alleged that ISIS was responsible for it, although the shooter was an Iowa-born man with no ISIS connection. He praised the federal response to Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico. He got into a heated argument over it with Chris Cuomo on CNN. Mr. Cuomo, let's see, you're just making this stuff up, Perry said during the interview. If half the country didn't have food or water, those people would be dying, and they're not. At some point, it's up to Puerto Rico to get themselves out of this situation and help their people. He questioned the existence of systemic racism in the U.S. Propensity of these events is actually going down. It's the sensationalism of these events that's changed. Well, yeah, we do see it now because we have cameras and phones and stuff. He voted against gold medals for the Capitol Police after the January 6th insurrection. So that's a great choice for the Intelligence Committee. But he says his 44 years of military service speaks for itself. Now let's turn to the other fine candidate we've got here, Doc Ronnie. There's a lot of meat on this one, too. He, as I said, was part of the White House medical unit under Obama, but under Trump, first off, in 2022, he was demoted by the Navy. He was elected to Congress, Texas representative for Congress in 2020, but in 2022, the Navy demoted him to captain for drinking, screaming at his staff, acting inappropriately, taking sleeping pills on duty. Not to mention, there was a multi-year investigation by the Inspector General of the Department of Defense, IGDOD, in 2018 about the White House medical unit's improper medical practices with no oversight, and that the pharmacy had severe and persistent problems prescribing errors to ineligible White House staff of opioids, sleeping meds, and other controlled substances. So let's see. Over that time, they ordered 34 packages of fentanyl. They also ordered 40 of morphine, 30 of ketamine. A New York lawyer named Lupin says they should go after his DEA license and his medical license. So you can look up Department of Defense Inspector General's report. We can put a link underneath this video, but I'll just give you the skinny of their conclusions, their findings. There was no oversight and there was ineligible prescribing going on, but they were also providing a lot of medical services for free to ineligible people that weren't billed for these special services. Yeah, there was a whole lot of shady taking place there. I mean, obviously both these dudes have the ear of the orange man, and who knows what kind of intel they'll be privy to, or who will possibly hear about it that shouldn't.
So now the one committee on the House side that receives the most sensitive national security information gathered from allies all over the world, information used to inform policymakers who want to protect our country's national security, our men and women in the military, our covert operatives, our allies. That committee now has those two new members on it who have proven that they will put what's good for Donald Trump over what's good for this country, including on the day of the deadly insurrection.
So congratulations, Mike Johnson. You've hurt national security yet again. but it's absurd. Ronnie Jackson has no place going near Congress, let alone the House Intel Committee.
Well, he couldn't get probably a basic security clearance. He definitely couldn't get a security clearance, much less TSSCI or the access he'll have as a member of the House Intel Committee.
You be the judge, the dumbest man in the world, the dumbest staff, most dangerous, and most insulting. I mean, your average person out on the street can't afford to get a quarter of the kind of care these guys get. And never mind, trying to claim that Joe Biden had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of cocaine in the White House, which he didn't. It was some tiny, less than a gram bag he found in a cloakroom after a tour group went through. And it was almost a year ago. It wasn't recently. But, pot, meat, kettle.